So have you ever had a client who keeps rescheduling at the last minute? I recently had a health coach ask me what to do in this situation. So today in this video, I'll share my insights on why this might be happening and what to do when it does happen. So let's start off by addressing the root of this problem. And you might be surprised to find out that it is likely not a problem with your client. To me, this problem stems from the way that you as the coach have set up the coaching relationship. So if you do not have a detailed coaching agreement and you have not set up roles, responsibilities, and expectations, then your client might be unclear about your cancellation and your rescheduling policy, and maybe they feel it's okay to reschedule at the last minute. But if you do have all of this fully detailed in your agreement and you've gone over it with your client, you've each signed the agreement and agreed to how you're going to show up and work together, then I truly feel this really shouldn't be happening on a regular basis. And if it does happen and you've got that agreement in place, you always have that agreement to fall back on. This is why we go over it in detail in the first place, right? So both parties, you and the client, are very clear on what we're committing to. And when someone isn't upholding their part of the agreement, then it's much easier to have a conversation about it since we've already gone over it and agreed to it, right? So it is an important reminder of why we have agreements to solidify the coaching relationship. So that is definitely my number one tip to avoid having your client rescheduling, is to have a detailed coaching agreement in place that you review in detail and that you both agree to and you both sign. I do offer a detailed 9-page coaching agreement in both my Health Coaching Essentials courses that you can customize, rebrand, and use in your own coaching practice. So in the event that you do have a coaching agreement in place and your client does keep rescheduling, what do you do then? Well, I might let it go the first time, and of course it's all going to depend on the reason why your client's rescheduling. But if it happens a second time, I would definitely address it right away. We do have an obligation as the coach to uphold and honor the coaching agreement, right? And if your client isn't doing their part, then it really does need to be addressed to maintain the trust in the coaching relationship. So when we're addressing this, we always remain very neutral, right? We're not judging, we're not assuming anything on the client's part. We're just really getting curious and coming from that place of serving the client and honoring the coaching relationship. So I would say something like, I just wanted to check in with you. I've noticed you've rescheduled at the last minute a couple of times now. I wanted to make sure that the times we've selected to meet are working for you. And then the client can share their thoughts, and if a new time needs to be rescheduled, then that's fine, right? Just find that new time that works best for both of you. And if not, if the client says, no, those times are fine, then I would go on further to say something like, I just wanted to remind you of the agreement that we established when we started working together. I do have a 24-hour cancellation policy, and I did let it go the first time you rescheduled, but from here on in, I will have to charge you for appointments that are rescheduled within 24 hours. Or, cancel and they lose a session, whatever your policy is, right? So just explain that. And then go on to say, how does that sound to you? Would you be able to commit to this aspect of our agreement going forward? You might want to also add something like, how can I support you in avoiding this happening in the future, right? How can I make you successful around this? So obviously there could be something going on with the client that is causing them to reschedule. They may have told you a reason, giving you an excuse or something. They might not be committed to the coaching process. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe the timing isn't right in their life. And so this conversation may bring up a bigger issue that absolutely needs to be addressed. So in terms of commitment level, I can see the rescheduling issue happening with pro bono clients. Those are those free clients, right? friends and family members who maybe aren't really committed to the process, but they're doing you a favor. This really is why I'm not a huge fan of working with clients for free, because they have no skin in the game. They're not committed, they're not invested. And I did record an entire separate video on why I'm not a fan of pro bono clients if you want to check that out. So it's also important to establish readiness for change. If your client isn't ready to make these changes, they might feel embarrassed or guilty that they haven't taken action. So early on in your coaching relationship, you'll want to do some readiness for change work to see which stage of change your client is in. And then, of course, coach appropriately for their readiness level. So the rescheduling could also be related to timing in their life, right? Perhaps you need to reschedule to a better time of day or week that we already talked about, but perhaps you also need to look at frequency. Are you meeting too often, like once a week? And maybe this isn't enough time for the client. They haven't had a chance yet to do the work. So maybe you do need to switch to every 2 weeks or something like that. It could also be about the time of year and the time of the client's life. Maybe they enrolled thinking they were totally committed and the timing is right, but since then something could have changed or come up, right? Work or family commitments, obligations, something unexpected, an event or a change in their life. If this is the case, then we really want to check in with the client's needs to find out what's right for them. You could put the coaching relationship on hold until a time when they're more ready and that they have that space and time in their life to dedicate to the coaching process. If you're doing that, I would only keep that kind of option open for probably about the next 6 months or so. So tip number 2 would be to have a conversation with the client to determine the reason for that constant rescheduling and then adjust accordingly. Sometimes we do need to have difficult conversations in coaching, but it is our responsibility to make sure the relationship is working for both of us. And if not, then we might have to let the client go, right? So you ask if the client can uphold their responsibilities and roles. And if they can't, then essentially you don't have a coaching relationship, right? If both of you can't commit. It only works if both parties are committed. So just to recap, my number 1 tip for when your client is constantly rescheduling at the last minute is to have a solid coaching agreement in place, which details roles, responsibilities, expectations, and your cancellation policy. And tip number 2 would be to have a conversation with the client to determine the reason for the constant rescheduling and then adjust accordingly with some of those tips that I shared with you today. As mentioned, sometimes we do need to have difficult conversations in coaching, but it really is our job to make sure that the coaching relationship is working for both parties. So I hope that's been helpful for you today. Please leave some comments, questions in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer them. Bye for now. Talk to you next time.